Check, 1, 2, 3. Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here today. My name is Samantha, and I'll be the moderator today. And it's so exciting to come together on such an important topic. Today, it's called Brave and Safe, a place for courageous conversations. And I'd like to begin this morning with a land acknowledgement. So we begin today to acknowledge that we walk upon the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples, and we recognize their history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land. Here in Ottawa, we acknowledge that the location that we dwell on is on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. If you're not joining us from Ottawa, we invite you to reflect upon the land in which you are joining us from. If you're unsure of what traditional land you're on, we invite you to visit nativeland.ca. On behalf of our funder, the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, our partners, the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa, and Julian of Norwich Anglican Church, and the organizers, Brianna, Donna, Lee, and Susan, I would like to welcome you here today as we begin the important and sometimes difficult work of learning, unlearning, talking about racism, and finding ways to work together to become anti-racist. Our goal today is to provide a brave, safe, and inclusive space to discuss issues surrounding racism. We are hoping that through hearing the stories of a variety of speakers, you will learn about some of the different forms of racism. Sometimes they're internal, interpersonal, institutional, or structural, and the multitude of ways it presents itself. We are hopeful that by offering this opportunity to learn from the sharing and exchange of life stories and experiences, as well as through a facilitated discussion, you will gain new knowledge that will empower the ways you find ways to affect anti-racism change in your own lives and our environments and communities. We hope you will listen to understand and become social impact leaders, as well as have the opportunity to make some lasting connections. Now, a video from our funder.
Hi everyone, my name is Angela Lee and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Research at the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. On behalf of the CRF, I bring warm greetings to the Brave and Safe event, a place for courageous conversations. The Canadian Race Relations Foundation is honored to support this initiative through our National Anti-Racism Fund. I would like to acknowledge that the land I'm speaking from is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now is home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13. I share this both to reflect on the lands that I'm settled on and the immense privileges that this has afforded to me, and as well to affirm the inherent treaty rights of all Indigenous peoples who have cared for and continue to care for these lands. It also serves as a personal commitment to the continued work with Indigenous nations and peoples to combat racism and mobilize action on the path towards reconciliation. I'm sorry I couldn't attend in person. I feel energized just reading the description of your agenda and the leadership that you are all taking on. I want to tell you about how the CRF was created, as I think this story connects well with the conversations you're having today. The Canadian Race Relations Foundation was created by the Government of Canada as a Crown Corporation in 1996 and as part of the Japanese-Canadian Redress Agreement, an apology to Japanese Canadians for racial discrimination and internment camps during World War II. The CRF's mandate is to promote the development, sharing, and application of knowledge and expertise in order to contribute to the elimination of racism and all forms of racial discrimination in Canadian society. The conversations and connections you're making today are crucial and create an important space for young leaders in anti-racism to learn from one another, collaborate, and change systems. We are pleased to fund this event and we look forward to hearing more from you. Thank you for attending, and we hope that you're inspired by these discussions. Have a great afternoon.
It's always nice to take a moment to pause and think about our layers. So I appreciate that you shared my layers with you today. And as you're going through this morning, think about your layers and layers of your identity, because we know that one way to create these brave and safe spaces in our community is by being our authentic selves. And I think we all have a responsibility together to create that psychologically safe space for everyone to be their authentic self. I was just having a conversation and I was saying that I remember being in high school, and it was grade 11, and I was the co-president. And I remember tasked with, of course, planning all the social activities for the year for students. And I remember thinking to myself, even back then, how do I get everyone involved? So we knew that there was always going to be one group of people in school that would always attend, likely the popular group at school. So my goal as co-president, and I never said it out loud, but it was in my heart every day, was I went and I talked to everybody, like all the different groups. And I spent the time getting to know them, and guess what? The school dances, the international days we celebrated, it was like huge amounts of participation. And I don't think that that was by accident. I think I learned at such a young age that I had a gift to bring people together and take the time to get to know people and their layers. I didn't have that word layers, but I use that word because often you hear, and especially when you're a racialized person, oh, where are you from? Like it's a past tense. But it's not a past tense for any of us. It's part of the mosaic of who we are. So I have multiple layers, and it's almost like a quilt with many patches. It's like all intersected together. So I think that's if there's one thing you remember from today, maybe think about those layers, and before you ask somebody, where are you from, maybe just ask them, can you share a little bit about yourself? And maybe you lead the conversation with those layers. Because I know it's a new, it's not super common yet, but my goal is to see it become really common. So some food for thought.
Maybe you've seen this graphic floating around the internet. It was designed by Andrew M. Ibrahim, and he gives Ibram X. Kendi and other modern anti-racism writers credit for many of the ideas within the graphic. I want to give you a quick overview of it because it's a useful tool. And then I want to show you a similar graphic we made that focuses on an anti-racism continuum for the workplace. So let's get into Dr. Ibrahim's graphic real quick. This graphic is broken down into 3 phases. As a person on a journey towards becoming anti-racist, you fall somewhere within this continuum. Ibrahim breaks this continuum into 3 main groups: the fear zone, the learning zone, and the growth zone. You can see that in the fear zone, we're either denying that racism is a problem, or we're not interested in or willing to take action to combat it. That is a comfortable space for people with race privilege. People sometimes get offended by that term, race privilege, so let me quickly define it to ease any defensive feelings toward that. Someone's ability to be in the fear zone means that their life is not negatively impacted by the color of their skin. It's not saying that their life is easy, that they've not had to work hard, and it doesn't negate struggles. It simply means that their life is not negatively impacted by the color of their skin. That's race privilege. And it's important to know not everyone has that luxury. If you're ready to move out of the fear zone, then you start to do some of these things in the learning zone. Asking questions, reading books, evaluating your privilege, listening to people who look different than you. And guess what? Some of the things in this learning zone are going to be shocking and upsetting and uncomfortable, because you'll learn that things you hoped weren't true, in fact, are true. Now, when you start to learn about and get shocked by the experiences of others, then hopefully you become motivated to push yourself into the growth zone. You start to speak out. You promote and advocate for policies that are anti-racist, and you yield your power to marginalized groups. The important thing to know here is that in order to move through this journey, to transition from the fear zone to the learning zone to the growth zone, you have to put in work. You have to allow for mental shifts, and you have to allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Also, equally important to note is that hitting the growth zone is not an end. While it's your goal to get there, staying there requires constant work. That becomes clear when you realize that all of the items listed in the growth zone are activities and not mindsets. It's not a matter of thinking these activities are good ideas. It's a matter of doing these activities. Now, from what Dr. Ibrahim created, we came up with a similar continuum for the workplace, starting again with the fear zone. Within this zone, you're complacent working in an organization that excludes people of marginalized groups. You're complacent working in an organization that demonstrates inequity in pay, hiring, and leadership. You intentionally or unintentionally choose to work most closely with people who look like you. You either do not understand or do not believe in the value that diversity brings to an organization, or you make comments or jokes that oppress marginalized groups. This list can continue, but you get the idea. And so, what are some characteristics that you can work towards that indicate you're moving from the fear zone to the learning zone? You start to notice and question why inequalities exist within the organization. You support and follow company-wide practices designed to mitigate bias. You understand that an organization is better when the workforce is diverse. You lead by example and speak professionally and honestly about others. And then ultimately, you want to move from the learning zone to the growth zone. In the growth zone, you ask questions of HR or leadership where you see inequality. Understand that working with people who do not look like you or have a similar background as you promotes richness in the organization. Understand that diversity creates advantages in problem solving, development, brainstorming, and really any other facet of the business. You continue to lead by example and help people facilitate the uncomfortableness. You allow time for change, understanding not everyone is at the same stage as you, but you don't grow complacent. And if policies don't exist that mitigate bias, you do your part to put some in place.